Before we dive in, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. It helps YouTube recommend more of my videos to you. Now let's begin. My name is Daryl, and this is a story that haunts me to this day. It all happened in December of 2005 at a small hotel in Myrtle Beach where I worked the night shift. Summers there were predictable, almost comforting. Families came for vacation. Golfers wandered the hallways in polos and khakis, and the air smelled of sunscreen and salt from the ocean. Nights in the off-season, however, carried a different kind of weight. The hotel felt hollow, like a shell of itself, the laughter and chatter long gone, replaced by the low hum of the heating system and the occasional squeak of a floorboard somewhere down the corridor. The cold winter wind pressed against the glass doors, carrying with it the faint scent of brine from the ocean and something fouler. A hint of decay, cigarette smoke, and whatever misfortune wandered in from the streets. The hallways were dim, lit only by the yellow glow of bulbs that flickered sporadically, and shadows pooled in the corners, stretching unnaturally whenever I walked past. Sometimes I'd catch a movement out of the corner of my eye, a dark shape that vanished when I looked directly. Even the rooms themselves seemed quieter, too quiet, like the walls had been holding their breath all day waiting. During winter, the hotel tried to lure snowbirds, older people from the north seeking a slow, peaceful escape. The idea made sense on paper, but the reality was grim. The low rates meant we attracted another type of guest. Locals who had nothing to lose, the sort who prowled in the shadows, strangers with hard eyes, unpredictable and dangerous. I had dealt with drug addicts, domestic disputes, and petty thieves before, but that winter would show me something far worse. That December, the hotel's emptiness and the chill in the air weren't the only things to fear. That night, the hotel felt colder than usual, even with the heater running full blast in the front office. I went through my usual routine, counting the drawer, checking that each door and window was locked, and scanning the silent hallways. The shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, stretching across the patterned carpet like black fingers whenever I passed. Somewhere down the hall, a door creaked slowly and then stopped, leaving only an oppressive silence that made my skin prickles. Andrew arrived on schedule, our little ritual bringing a strange comfort to the otherwise lonely shift. He was the maintenance man, a dependable friend who worked second shift at all 3 hotels our company owned. Andrew always brought a bit of light to these nights, sometimes food, sometimes stories about the weird things he'd found while checking pipes and boilers. But even he seemed tense as he stepped into the front office, glancing at the empty parking lot outside the glass doors with a subtle frown. I handed him some money to grab dinner while I sat in the dimly lit office. But something felt off. The hum of the heater, the distant whine of a car engine outside, even the soft thud of my own heartbeat seemed louder, sharper. From the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a figure standing just outside, a shadow too tall and too still to be anyone waiting for a room. When I looked directly, nothing was there, just the empty lot and the dim reflection of the office lights in the glass. There was a chill that went beyond the cold air, an unshakable sense that someone or something was watching. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just nerves. But the feeling lingered, tightening around me like a noose, foreshadowing the terror that was about to shatter that quiet winter night. The night was unusually silent when the door chime rang. I thought it was Andrew returning early, but a strange sharpness in the sound made my stomach twist. I turned from the back office, clutching my wallet, and froze. Andrew was just ahead, walking toward me when he suddenly crumpled to the floor. Panic hit me. Before I could react, a fist connected with my jaw. A steel pipe. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth and my knees buckled beneath me. The figure loomed over me, its face shadowed, radiating menace. my vision blurred with blood, ears ringing from the impact. Then the pipe struck again, this time on my head, sending a wave of dizziness so intense I thought I would black out. Somewhere through the chaos, I thought I heard it mutter something about Andrew, but the words were lost in my racing heartbeat. I tried to rise, disoriented, attempting to grab the pipe or defend myself, but each effort was met with another strike. The blows alternated between sharp, blinding pain and dull, throbbing hits. Shadows around me twisted violently as I noticed a second figure near the doorway. Silent, watchful, an accomplice I hadn't seen. Then, as abruptly as it began, it ended. The first attacker turned and fled, dragging the second with him. I slumped against the counter, trembling, blood streaming down my face, barely able to comprehend what had happened. Andrew lay beside me, shaken but alive, the only anchor to reality in a night turned into a waking nightmare. I staggered to my feet, every movement sending jolts of pain through my skull. Blood ran freely down my face, stinging my eyes, blurring the office lights into red haze. My hands shook as I grabbed the phone, fumbling with the receiver, trying desperately to call 911. Each second felt stretched, the silence around me thick, heavy, as if the hotel itself was holding its breath, waiting. Then the door creaked. My heart leapt, thinking the attackers had returned. Instead, it was Andrew, pale but determined, dragging a uniformed police officer into the office. Relief and terror collided inside me. The officer's calm voice was almost surreal against the echo of my own ragged breathing. Andrew explained what had happened. The second man, the one I hadn't noticed, was supposed to help his friend subdue him while the first attacked me. But he had frozen. Andrew, seeing an officer pass by outside, flagged him down, bringing help before things could get worse. The thought of what might have happened if Andrew hadn't intervened pressed down on me like a stone. The attackers were gone, vanished into the night. But their presence lingered, the hotel now a hollow shell echoing with their violence. Every shadow seemed thicker, every hallway longer, every creak a whisper of what had just occurred. The place that had felt eerie before now felt truly alive with menace. Even as the officer examined the scene, I couldn't shake the sense of danger still waiting in the corners, hidden in the darkness, unresolved. That night had changed the hotel. And me. It wasn't just a building filled with rooms anymore, it was a place where I had faced something almost beyond comprehension, and survived by the narrowest margin. The ride to the ER was a blur of flashing lights and sirens, but even that couldn't drown out the pounding in my head or the metallic taste of blood that seemed to coat every nerve. The fluorescent lights of the hospital burned into my eyes, harsh and unforgiving, and the sterile smell of antiseptic mingled with the lingering odor of blood from my clothes. Every sound, footsteps in the hall, the distant hum of machines, felt amplified, each one jarring me, reminding me of the attack. Doctors worked quickly, stitching together the 13 staples my head required, checking me for a concussion and monitoring for internal injuries. But the real horror came later when I was shown the surveillance footage of the attack. I had thought I remembered a single strike, a single blow with the pipe. But I was wrong. The footage revealed a nightmare I hadn't lived consciously. I had been pummeled repeatedly 10 or more times, alternating between fists and the steel pipe, while my body had tried in vain to rise and fight back. The sheer violence, the cold, deliberate strikes made my stomach churn even weeks later. The PTSD settled in quickly. Shadows in my home seemed to twitch with malicious intent. Every unexpected noise made my pulse spike. I flinched at sudden movements, avoided being alone in dimly lit places, and felt the icy grip of fear whenever I passed hotel lobbies or empty streets at night. Even when I returned to work, my hands shook at each creak of the floor, each flicker of light, every chime of a door. The memory of that night was not something that faded. It lingered, embedded in the smallest details of daily life. To this day, the attackers were never found. The unresolved danger, the shadow of their violence, still haunts me. Even in daylight, in seemingly safe places, there is a faint whisper of that night. A reminder that some horrors do not end when the threat is gone. Some nights I can still feel the weight of that steel pipe, the cold intent in those shadowed eyes, and the echo of what nearly took my life. The darkness of that hotel did not leave with the attackers. It came home with me, and it never truly lets go. I used to work night shifts until this happened. It's spooky season, so stories like this always float back into my head when I'm talking with buddies about the creepy things we've been through. But I almost never share this one. It isn't a classic ghost story you tell over a few beers. It's quieter, more insidious, and it still gives me chills thinking about it. I worked the night shift at a large manufacturing facility, a building so big and empty at night it could swallow you whole. Night shifts were small, 5 security staff, 5 of us handling admin and packing. I usually sat with security as they patrolled, switching between cameras and wandering the silent halls. Most nights were quiet, almost painfully boring, with only the hum of machinery or the occasional squeak of metal echoing in the darkness. The facility had a reputation, a haunted story passed along the grapevine. No one knew why. No accidents, no deaths, no tragedies. Nothing to justify the rumors. And yet, when night fell, the building felt imposing, almost alive. It was surrounded by woods circled with fencing and lit by motion-activated lights that created more shadows than they dispelled. Sounds carried strangely, bouncing off steel walls and concrete floors, making the emptiest corners feel inhabited. Even without an actual reason, the building had a presence, a subtle pressure that made you uneasy when walking its corridors alone. There was nothing supernatural yet, just the quiet weight of isolation. But something was about to break that uneasy calm. Something that would make every shadow and every flicker of light feel alive in a way I had never experienced before. That night, the building felt colder than usual, the kind of chill that creeps through steel doors and concrete walls, lingering on your skin. My routine was simple. Check cameras, track the security patrols, handle admin tasks, and mostly wait for the hours to pass. The vast emptiness of the facility pressed down on me, echoing every footstep, every shuffle of papers. Even the humming machinery sounded sharper, almost like it was listening. Around the middle of my shift, I decided to take my lunch break. It was chilly outside and I wanted my bigger jacket, so I stepped out to the back door. The fence ran close, maybe 10 yards away, its chain links catching faint glimmers from the motion-activated lights. I had to wave my arms to keep the light on as I searched for the ashtray and finished my cigarette, sipping coffee that did little to warm me. The motion-activated lights flickered, plunging me into shadows. For a moment, the darkness felt solid, pressing against my eyes. That's when I heard it. A faint jingling of the fence across from me. My mind immediately searched for a rational explanation. Animals, wind, maybe even a prank by some wandering high school kids. I squinted into the shadows, my breath visible in the cold air, trying to make out what was causing it. Instinctively, I said, "Hello?" The jingling stopped. Silence stretched for a heartbeat, then resumed. Something was there, but just barely. A kutsat, a subtle shift, a movement too deliberate to be a deer or raccoon. My pulse spiked. My rational mind waged a battle against my gut. There's nothing here. It's just your imagination. But every instinct screamed otherwise. The fence jingled again, soft and deliberate. My eyes strained against the darkness, trying to adjust as the weak moonlight struggled through the trees. At first, I thought it was a kid trying to spook us, some lone high school prankster testing the haunted reputation of the facility. But the movement was too precise, too deliberate, and far too close to ignore. I grabbed my phone, trying to illuminate the area, but the light cut in and out as I waved my arms to activate the motion sensor. That's when I saw it, a figure opposite me, fidgeting with the links of the fence. Just standing there, not running, not waving, simply watching and manipulating the metal as if testing a boundary. My chest tightened, the cigarette in my hand trembling as my pulse surged. Instinct told me to radio security. "Hey, we've got a visitor at the north door behind the fence," I whispered urgently into my walkie. There was a pause, then a calm reply. "We aren't reading any movement at the fence. Is it in the tree line?" "Negative," I said, eyes locked on the figure right in front of me. The jingling stopped. Silence returned, thicker now, almost suffocating. Then, without warning, the figure lunged. The motion was lightning fast, a blur racing toward me through the dim light. I let out a choked gasp, smashing my coffee cup in a desperate attempt to hurry inside. My hand slammed against the doorknob, trying to hold it as the figure's momentum pressed against the other side. The deadbolt became a frantic puzzle as my heart thumped in my throat. Every rational thought fled. All I could feel was terror. The rush of adrenaline, the cold night air biting at my skin, the impossible speed of the thing barreling toward me. Then, as suddenly as it came, the pressure stopped. The knob ceased jerking, footsteps receded, and the silence returned. I slumped against the door, shaking, heart hammering, unsure whether what I had seen was real. The camera feed, the fence, the shadows. None of it explained the door handle jerking as I had pulled back, the sudden motion that had almost pulled me outside. Something had been there, and whatever it was had vanished before anyone else could see it. I stumbled inside, heart hammering, breathing ragged, hands still shaking from holding the door. The office felt impossibly small, suffocating, though the night outside had been vast and empty. I radioed security again, trying to get someone to hurry over, but my words came out in a panicked rush. "Get down here now!" My voice cracked against the silence, urgent and raw. Moments later, a few of the security staff arrived, their faces a mix of concern and amusement. At first, they tried to play it off, laughing, assuming I had been spooked by shadows or imagination. "Great Halloween joke, huh?" one teased, nudging another. But I could barely speak and my mind raced too fast for explanations. The doorknob had moved on its own. Something had been out there, pressed against the door, and it wasn't a prank. We watched the camera feed, rewinding and replaying the moments before I bolted inside. At first it seemed ordinary, just me standing there alone. But then we noticed it. The handle jerking downward even after I'd let go, and right before I ran, the fence seemed to twitch, as if something had propelled itself toward me with impossible speed. No holes, no breaks in the links, no other person visible anywhere on the footage. The staff went quiet. The usual chatter, the jokes, the banter, all vanished. Something unspoken passed between us, a recognition of the uncanny, though no one wanted to admit it out loud. The north end of the building had always felt strange, but that night confirmed it. Even in a place that should have been empty, something unseen was capable of moving, of watching, and of nearly reaching me. I finished my shift, still trembling, avoiding the back door entirely. No one used it again that night. The rest of the building was quiet, but the sense of eyes in the darkness lingered, refusing to leave, a subtle pressure reminding me that not all shadows are harmless. The rest of that night and the weeks that followed left a mark I couldn't shake. I avoided the back door entirely, taking my breaks in the lobby or lingering indoors with coworkers, telling myself it was safer and more rational. Yet every time I thought back to that fence, that impossible motion, I felt the same chill creeping down my spine. The image of the handle jerking down just as I stepped back haunted me. I knew I hadn't imagined it. The camera captured it, a silent witness to the inexplicable. Even the most experienced security guard, the one who had worked there for years, admitted quietly toward the end of a shift, "I never really liked the north end. Feels like someone's eyes are always on me." It was the most he'd ever said, and the weight behind it made my stomach tighten. If he felt that unease, it confirmed what I had experienced. The building itself, or whatever lingered in the shadows, had a presence that refused to be rationalized. I stayed on for another 7 months, long enough to see the company change hands and the overnight shifts disappear. There was never another incident. No sudden appearances, no moving handles, no footsteps echoing when no one was there. But the memory persisted, subtle and insistent, a shadow in my mind that I couldn't shake. I never went outside by the north door again, never tested the motion-activated lights or lingered near the fence. It became a line I refused to cross, even when rationality tried to argue otherwise. I've never had my imagination trick me like that before or since. I truly believe something was out there, something that existed beyond explanation, beyond logic. I keep the story mostly to myself, partly because co-workers brushed it off, partly because no one wants to acknowledge what they can't understand. But I often wonder if others have had similar experiences in the building, quietly tucked away in their own memories. The haunted reputation of that old factory lives on, whether anyone admits it or not. I never sought it out again, yet the north end remains alive in my mind, a dark space where something unseen waits, patient and watchful, just beyond the reach of the light. This isn't fiction. I want to make that clear right away. I'm not writing a scary story for fun or to try and spook anyone. I'm being completely serious. I need insight, or at the very least, someone to listen to what I've been going through. Because I lived on haunted lands right next to Indian burial grounds, and I think something from there followed me. I'm not going to disclose the exact location because I still have family living in that area and they want nothing to do with public attention. But I can tell you this much. I lived on that property for the first 10 years of my life. I moved back when I was 15, stayed until I turned 18, and then left again. Mostly because of what was happening there. Even after all this time, I can feel it hanging over me. That land carried history long before I was born, and whether I knew it or not, I disturbed something I shouldn't have. The things I saw, the things I heard, they never really left me. And now, years later, they're showing up again. The land itself has a long, dark history. Not half a mile from where my house stood, there used to be segregated churches from the 1800s, one for white residents, one for black residents. Both churches had burned down long before I lived there, but the cemeteries remained, quiet and eerie, even in the sunlight. I learned later that the marble tombstones in the cemeteries had been stolen by a man who wanted to use them to build a wall around his own home. Not long after that wall was completed, his house caught fire and he died in it. It felt like some kind of warning that even the land remembered. On top of that, Indian burial grounds lay not far from the property. I didn't know the significance as a child. I used to play there, dig in the dirt for fun, and collect arrowheads or broken pieces of pottery. I'd bring them home, thinking they were harmless treasures, completely unaware that I might have been disturbing something sacred. The old cemeteries were tempting for spooky adventures too. My siblings and I would sneak off to them, wandering among the remaining tombstones, daring each other to linger by the older graves. There was a creepiness about the place. The leaning stones, moss crawling over dates, the faint smell of wet earth that clung to my clothes. It felt exciting, like stepping into a story, but there was always that underlying weight, even then, that something was watching us. Even back then at night, we'd hear it. blood-curdling screams coming from the woods surrounding the haunted areas. Sometimes I tried to ignore them. Other times I couldn't. Those screams are still stuck in my mind, and I can still feel that heaviness in the air when I think about them. Living in that house, I was tormented like nothing else. It started small. Shadows moving at the edge of my vision, objects slightly out of place. But it escalated quickly. I would see a tall black shadow roaming the halls, so solid and silent that I'd sometimes follow it around corners, convinced it was one of my family members, only to find nothing there. Things in my room would disappear and reappear in odd places. I'd hear knocks on my headboard, always in intervals of 3, like a pattern I couldn't understand. Footsteps echoed up and down the stairwells when everyone was asleep, even when my parents swore the house was empty. My father eventually told us about his own experience. He was followed in the house by a lady in black and white, a woman in a white dress with no eyes. Hearing him describe it was chilling, but it made me feel less alone in a way, knowing he wasn't imagining it either. There was one incident I never shared with anyone outside my family. I was lying in bed when I felt something heavy press me down. My body was pinned face down and I couldn't move or speak. It was like a blanket weighing hundreds of pounds had settled over me. I could feel it breathing, shifting slightly, and I knew I wasn't dreaming. The terror was raw, immediate, and inescapable. Even my siblings had spine-tingling experiences. My parents and I often tried to rationalize it. Wind, old houses creaking, imagination. But the house had a presence, a weight that was impossible to explain. When I investigated one of the blood-curdling screams from the woods with my fiancé years later, we followed the sounds closer than I ever had as a child. The voices seemed to surround us, coming from all directions at once, though we saw nothing. It was the kind of fear that doesn't leave your stomach. It clings to you and refuses to let go. That's when he finally decided we needed to move. Even after leaving, I carried the memory of that shadow, those knocks, that heavy pressure, and the oppressive feeling of being watched. It stayed with me, lodged in my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. Years passed. I moved, tried to put that house and the land behind me, convinced that distance would break whatever had haunted me. But it didn't. Recently, I began seeing it again. The tall black shadow, the same one that used to roam the halls of my childhood home, appeared in my new space. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a leftover echo of fear. But the feeling that accompanied it was unmistakable. Heavy negative energy that pressed into my chest, filling the room with an oppressive weight. I felt my pulse spike, my stomach knot, just knowing it was there. What's worse, my sister, who lives far away, has started seeing the figure too. The same tall shadow, the same feeling of suffocating dread. Moving didn't help either of us. Whatever it is, I have no doubt now that it's attached to me and maybe in some way to my family. Every day, the presence reminds me it hasn't left. I catch glimpses at the edge of my vision. I feel it behind me or hovering near doors and corners. The air grows colder, heavier, sometimes carrying the faint scent of wet earth or decayed leaves. My sleep is broken, haunted by that same sense of paralysis I experienced as a child. I try to rationalize it, to convince myself that it's a memory, a trick of my mind. But my body doesn't lie. I feel it. I know it's real. And it isn't just a fleeting thing, it's persistent, patient, and relentless. The most frightening part is understanding that I can't run from it. Moving houses, leaving the land, even trying to distract myself with normal life hasn't made a difference. It's as if a part of that haunted land followed me, bound to me, refusing to be ignored. I'm starting to feel cornered, Like whatever this is knows I'm aware of it now and is waiting for the right moment to make itself undeniable. And every day I'm reminded of the terrible truth. Escaping the land didn't free me. It's still with me. I don't know what to do anymore. I've moved, tried to create a safe space, but it follows. The shadow, the weight, the oppressive energy, they've returned with a vengeance. I can feel it pressing into my life, into my home, into my thoughts. Even my sister sees it now, far away, and I realize this isn't just tied to a place anymore. It's tied to me. I've exhausted every rational explanation, sleep deprivation, imagination, childhood trauma, none of it fits. I've lived through it before, and I know the difference between fear and this presence. It's patient, silent, but always there. It's in the corners of my vision, in the chill that suddenly drops the room's temperature, in the heaviness that settles over me like a physical weight. I'm terrified of going through what I experienced as a child. The inability to move, the feeling of being pinned down, the black figure looming above me. And I fear it's only a matter of time before it escalates. I've come to the harsh truth. Moving away didn't save me. Distancing myself from the land didn't matter. Whatever was attached, whatever I disturbed as a child followed me, waiting all these years. I share this because I need someone to understand, someone to advise because I can't handle it alone. I can't go back and I can't seem to move forward. And as I write this, I feel it again. Watching, waiting, patient. It hasn't left. It never will. I was 17 when I got my provisional license. And like most people my age, I was learning to drive with that mix of excitement and nerves that comes with being behind the wheel for the first time. I had been taking formal driving lessons, but outside of that, I often went out with my dad, practicing on quiet roads while he sat in the passenger seat calm and patient, giving instructions in his usual low voice. My dad worked late, so these drives were almost always after dark. The sky, a deep black that swallowed the road ahead. That January night was bitterly cold, the rain falling in fat, wet drops that streaked across the windshield, and the roads glistened under the headlights, slick and reflective. The air smelled of wet earth and moss, sharp and clean, but also heavy with the dampness of the surrounding forest. We were driving along familiar roads heading toward the village where my dad grew up. It was perched on a hill, steep, winding streets perfect for practicing hill starts, which was exactly why he had suggested it. I remember the tires crunching over wet leaves and pebbles, the faint scent of smoke from chimneys drifting in the wind, and the occasional lonely howl of a distant dog echoing through the hills. Cars were scarce, almost non-existent, leaving only the rhythmic hum of the engine and the occasional swish of the wipers to fill the silence. At first, it all felt ordinary, almost comforting. A routine drive with my dad, nothing out of place, but even then I could feel the tension that comes with darkness pressing in at the edges of the road. A quiet, creeping awareness that in a place like this, the night could conceal almost anything. After driving around the village for about an hour, we decided to head home. As we reached the edge of the settlement, two roads branched off. One the familiar route back, the other a narrow country road. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked my dad where it led. He smiled faintly in the dim light and said it was an old road he remembered from his childhood, winding through the hills, eventually connecting back to our home. He claimed to know it well, and for some reason that was enough to tempt me into taking it. As soon as we turned onto the country road, the familiar sense of security vanished. The road was a single lane, narrow and lined with steep ditches on either side. The headlights of the truck barely penetrated the darkness, illuminating only a few feet ahead, leaving everything beyond the beam cloaked in shadow. The trees pressed close to the edge of the road, their branches dripping wet and glistening like dark veins in the rain. I could see owls perched in the skeletal trees, foxes slipping between shadows, and the occasional startled deer bounding across the road. The longer we drove, the more I felt the distance from civilization grow, the isolation settling in with an almost tangible weight. Hours seemed to pass in a blur, though I knew it couldn't have been that long. My eyelids grew heavy, the chills seeping into my bones, and yet I kept driving, hoping to find a wider stretch to turn around. Something about the road felt wrong, too long, too empty, and with every corner, every bend, I became more aware of the darkness pressing in on us, swallowing the edges of the road and the familiar world behind my headlights. After what felt like an endless stretch of narrow, winding road, I finally spotted a slightly wider patch where I could attempt a turn. My shoulders were stiff from gripping the wheel, my eyes strained from the relentless darkness pressing against the headlights. As we approached the widening, I noticed something on the left side of the road about 20 yards back. An old cottage half hidden in the shadows, its outline almost swallowed by the night. Its windows were dark, empty, and devoid of glass, the doorway gaping like a black maw. Ivy and overgrown bushes clung to the walls, the structure sagging in places as if time itself had given up on it. The sight sent a shiver down my spine. Even my dad, calm as ever, glanced at it uneasily. I kept my focus on turning the truck, trying not to dwell on the cottage, but as the headlights swept across its facade, I saw movement. For a brief, terrifying second, a tall, dark figure appeared in one of the empty window frames. My stomach twisted and my pulse spiked, though I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the branches or my own fatigue. I blinked and it was gone, leaving only the abandoned shell of a house. My hands shook slightly on the wheel as I muttered a quiet, probably just my imagination. But I couldn't shake the unease crawling up my spine. Every instinct in me urged caution. The cottage seemed alive in some intangible way, the dark voids of its windows like watching eyes. I had one goal in mind: turn the car around, get back on the road, and put as much distance between us and that place as possible. Yet even as I maneuvered the truck, my heart kept racing. The brief glimpse of that figure burned into my mind like a warning I couldn't ignore. I finally had the truck facing the right way, ready to drive back down the narrow road when it stalled. At first I thought nothing of it. Stalls were common while I was still learning, especially at slow speeds on uneven surfaces. I tried to turn the key again, but it wouldn't fit. My dad leaned over to help, fumbling with the ignition while the wind carried the faint scent of wet earth and decaying leaves into the cab. After several tense seconds, the key finally turned, the engine roared to life, and the headlights flickered back on. That's when I saw it. Standing directly in the middle of the road, not 10 feet from the front of the truck, was a figure unlike anything I had ever seen. A man, or at least humanoid, wearing a gas mask, a long raincoat plastered with mud and streaked with moss. He stood perfectly still, staring at me, the darkness of the mask reflecting the beam of the headlights like hollow eyes. My chest seized, my hands froze on the wheel, and I couldn't even process the horror in front of me. I didn't know whether to drive forward or reverse. Every instinct screamed danger. Panic clawed at me, and finally I honked the horn, a desperate, sharp blast that echoed across the empty countryside. The figure darted instantly into the shadows along the side of the road, disappearing as if swallowed by the night. My dad glanced at me, puzzled. "What are you honking at?" he asked. I could only stammer, pointing to the spot where the figure had been, voice trembling. "Didn't you see that?" I yelled, but he only shook his head, staring at me as if I were joking. I didn't answer. I just floored the accelerator, the tires screaming on the slick surface, heart hammering, desperate to put distance between us and whatever that thing had been. The dark, narrow road seemed endless, and every shadow felt alive, every rustle of leaves like footsteps closing in. I didn't look back again until we had finally left that stretch of road behind. We finally reached a stretch of road that felt familiar again, where the woods thinned and the faint glow of distant houses began to appear. I was still shaking, hands gripping the wheel, pulse racing from what had just happened when a BMW came toward us in the opposite lane. At first, I thought nothing of it. People drove these roads late at night all the time, but as it drew closer, it started drifting slightly onto my side of the road. My stomach clenched and I instinctively slowed, expecting the car to veer back or turn into the small car park for the woodland trails on the left. But it didn't. The car continued straight toward me, unblinking, silent except for the quiet hum of the engine. I slowed almost to a halt, heart hammering in my chest, every nerve screaming danger. At the last possible second, the car swerved back onto its proper side of the road, but in that split second, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. A gas mask. The same one. The figure I had seen at the abandoned cottage was sitting in the back seat, staring at me through the rear window, perfectly still, its black eyes fixed. I gasped, and the BMW seemed to vanish before I could process it, leaving the road empty once again. My dad, still calm and oblivious to what I had just witnessed, asked why I had slowed down so suddenly. I couldn't answer. I couldn't. There was no car, no BMW, no figure. Just the empty road and the memory of those hollow, unblinking eyes. We drove on in tense silence, me gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, refusing to glance behind. Every shadow, every reflection in the wet pavement seemed like it might be watching, following, waiting. The world felt subtly wrong, as if the night itself had shifted during those moments, leaving me with a memory that made no sense and a fear I couldn't explain. By the time we finally pulled into the village I lived in, the sense of relief was muted, layered with an unease that refused to fade. My dad parked in the driveway as usual, shutting off the engine, but the silence that followed felt heavier than any sound I'd heard that night. I kept glancing at the mirrors, expecting, almost dreading, another glimpse of that gas-masked figure, but there was nothing. Just the familiar, ordinary view of our street, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Even so, the memory of that night lingered like a shadow pressing against my mind. Inside the house, I went through the motions of getting ready for bed, but sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house settling, every distant rustle of leaves outside felt magnified, as if the night had left something behind in the world and in my mind. I thought back to the abandoned cottage, to the figure standing motionless in the road, to the BMW that had appeared and disappeared in the blink of an eye. I had driven these roads many times since, but I never could shake the feeling that the darkness held things I couldn't see, that the ordinary night could transform in an instant into something unreal, almost predatory. Even years later, I replay that drive in my mind, the narrow country road, the cottage swallowed by ivy, the figure in the gas mask, and the fleeting encounter in the BMW. I have no answers, only questions, and that persistent gnawing fear that maybe what I saw wasn't meant to be seen. That the night sometimes keeps its secrets just beyond the reach of reason. It's a memory that still tightens my chest. A reminder that even familiar roads can hide something that shouldn't exist. And that sometimes curiosity leads you somewhere you can never fully leave behind. I work at a cafe in downtown, in an area that's nice by day but gets unsettling at night. There are a few homeless shelters nearby, and the streets carry a steady undercurrent of a serious drug problem. Walking home in the winter here is always eerie. Dark streets, flickering streetlights, shadows that stretch longer than they should. Most nights it's fine. People keep to themselves. But downtown carries its own kind of danger. Unpredictable, sudden, and often completely insane. I've learned to stay alert, But some nights even that isn't enough. This particular evening started normally. I was working behind the bar, wiping down counters, serving coffee, and trying not to think about how dark it would get when my shift ended. That's when I noticed a kid, red hair, probably early 20s, sitting quietly in the seating area. At first he looked harmless enough, but then he began muttering under his breath. It was strange at first, almost rhythmic, like a chant. The chanting went on for a minute or two. At first, it was just strange, almost rhythmic, like some low, incoherent mumble that barely registered over the clink of coffee cups and the hum of the espresso machine. Then he started moving his hands, twisting, curling, and gesturing in ways that didn't make sense, like he was trying to manipulate some unseen force. My unease grew. Other customers started glancing at him, confused, unsure whether to intervene or ignore him. Suddenly, he jumped to his feet, the murmur transforming into a loud, chaotic yell. He stomped through the cafe, knocking over a chair and drawing all attention toward him. His wild red hair was like a flare in the dim, warm lights of the cafe, his eyes darting as though seeing things no one else could. I approached slowly, trying to de-escalate. "Hey, you need to leave for today," I said, keeping my voice calm. That's when he stopped and turned, looking me straight in the eyes. His pupils were dilated, his stare unblinking, as if he was peering straight through me. "This is all a giant game. I'll fucking kill you with one finger." I froze for a second, my gut twisting. This wasn't just a loudmouth or a prankster. There was something raw and dangerous behind that gaze. I'd heard threats before. Threats were a regular part of working downtown. But the intensity, the conviction in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. I shooed him out as calmly as I could, feeling every eye in the cafe on me. The customers murmured nervously, unsure if this was part of some performance or real danger. I returned behind the bar, trying to shake the unease, but the chill in the air lingered. Something told me this wasn't over. Hours later, I was locking up and heading to the parking garage where my car sat, about 6 blocks away. The sun had long disappeared, and winter in the city brought a darkness that felt almost unnatural. Streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long, broken shadows across sidewalks dusted with snow. Even familiar streets seemed different at night, narrower, emptier, more threatening. I walked briskly, hands stuffed in my pockets, trying to ignore the unease curling in my chest. Then I heard it, a faint hissing like air escaping from a valve. My head snapped toward the noise, but no one was there. The quiet hum of the city now seemed sharper, almost oppressive. I quickened my pace, then came footsteps, hurried, crunching in the snow behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just empty street, flickering shadows. My pulse kicked up. The dark alleys, the cold wind whipping at my face, the silence broken only by my own footsteps. It felt like the night itself was closing in. I made a beeline for the garage stairwell, ignoring the elevator. My heart pounded in rhythm with the echoes of footsteps that weren't mine. One flight up, I heard the door I had just gone through slam shut behind me. My stomach dropped. Whoever or whatever Martin was following me wasn't far. Every instinct screamed at me to run faster. My breaths came ragged, mist curling into the frigid air. My hands shook as I fumbled with my keys at the top of the stairwell. The city streets, usually mundane, now felt alive with threat, and I realized how close I had come to a real confrontation. I flung myself into my car, locking the doors with trembling hands. Relief surged, only for a heartbeat. Then I saw him, the redhead from the cafe. His face was twisted with fury, eyes wide, veins prominent, hands shaking like he was ready to strike at any moment. He sprinted toward my car, screaming at the top of his lungs, pounding violently on the windows. "I'm going to fucking kill you!" My body reacted before my brain could catch up. I shoved the door into him as hard as I could, forcing him back. The impact rattled the glass. But he recovered instantly, screaming more ferociously, pounding on the hood, slamming his fists against the sides. The intensity, the raw hatred in his eyes made my skin crawl. I fumbled with the ignition, slamming it into gear. The engine roared to life and I peeled out of the parking spot, spinning tires on the icy snow. He chased for a moment, then skidded to a stop as I accelerated away. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the wheel. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't just a random encounter. It was a deliberate, dangerous attack. My mind raced, imagining worst-case scenarios. Every shadow in the city, every alley, every silent doorway seemed like a potential hiding place for him. I made it home and immediately called the police. Their arrival the next morning brought confirmation. The redhead was indeed unstable, claiming to be part of the Illuminati, and corroborated my story completely. Small jail time and a restraining order later, he was gone. A lingering reminder of the danger that could appear anywhere at any time. Even after it was over, the night haunted me. Downtown never looked the same. Snow-dusted streets, flickering streetlights, and empty alleys carried a latent threat I hadn't noticed before. That redhead had turned a simple walk to my car into a full-blown nightmare. I replayed the chase in my mind endlessly. The hiss in the snow, the footsteps behind me, his face twisted with rage, pounding on my car windows. It wasn't just fear, it was a lesson in unpredictability. You could be surrounded by familiar streets, familiar buildings, and still feel utterly vulnerable. That night taught me how quickly ordinary situations could spiral into danger when you're confronted by someone unhinged, someone who truly believes they hold power over you. After that, I became hyper-aware. Even small noises, shadows, or sudden movements made my chest tighten. I changed my routine. Never walking alone in the dark, never lingering outside after work, always checking my surroundings. That night shifted the way I interacted with the city, a constant reminder that even mundane streets could hide chaos. The redhead never returned. The restraining order and his brief jail time kept him away. But I still think about him sometimes, wondering what he would have done if I hadn't gotten to the car when I did. Downtown has a way of making the ordinary feel dangerous, but that night, the danger became vivid, real, and unavoidable. Even now, years later, I remember the hiss, the footsteps, the pounding on my windows, and the raw intensity in his eyes. Some nights the city feels quiet, peaceful, but I know it's always ready to remind me that chaos can appear in an instant and there's no warning before the shadows move. And that's a wrap for today's video. I hope you enjoyed these chilling stories. If you did, don't forget to drop a comment with your favorite one, hit that like button, and subscribe for more spine-tingling tales coming your way. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.